and say, hey, yeah, I mean, I got two daughters at home, and I have, as far as the good days and the bad days, I hope that we can really dive into some of that with the conversation, and because the way it looks, growing up, there's such a hard thing from Hollywood and stuff on how people want to view when they see the squad car and they see the uniform and they see the badge, and they want to say to themselves, like, they have this, like, well, therein must be the special force operator who can perform surgery, heart surgery on somebody at the same time as writing a fictional novel. And you go down the list of all these things that, the expectations that exist there. And it's just, it's not the case. And, they're real human beings, real men and women with real lives of their own, and they put their pants on the same way, everybody else does in the morning. And so 2000 to 2005 era, I think something that, again, people, they think DSU and maybe they just only focus on, okay, these guys in this uniform. But I mean, I had Nick Walker, like, as a quarterback for a short stint, played University of Montana. I had a left tackle for several years I went against that was, well, back it up, for the first year and a half, 2 years, I had a left tackle that played for Montana State University that transferred over, and Dennis Morris. I had a left tackle that came out of NDSU, Josh Epperly, who came back after a couple years and played against him. I had the guy who played next to me on the D-line side of it, Ross Walker. I mean, he's a UND guy who came back over. And so, there's a few others in there that aren't coming to mind right away, but we had, you had Phil Espinosa and Rafe Espinosa. And so Rafe, he was a Boise State guy who came over. You had his brother, Phil.
I got here, we won 2 games, and we beat Jamestown because everybody beats Jamestown. Mm-hmm. So I'm talking to a lot of these different people, and maybe it's the Baker, the small town feel. I was talking to a lot of people, and they're like, dude, I'm thinking about transferring. Like, we got to get out of here. And it never crossed my mind. We won that one game, and it just never crossed my mind, like, I got to get out of here. Like, I don't want to meet more people. I don't want to mess up my academics. Like, this is what I want to do. And so once I kind of had that perspective switch, like, there's people that think about just the W's. Like, these are brothers. These are, like, I hardly talk to anybody from high school, but they're all here. The college guys are here. And so I just couldn't fathom that we were trying to get out of something instead of changing it. And luckily, you guys had success. We had a little bit of some down years, and then now we're where we're at today. So it's cool to see that we're back where we need to be, because I was talking to Coach Stanton the other day, and I'm just, if you're a NAI D2 caliber guy, you can't quite make NDSU. It's almost a uneducated decision to go anywhere else in the NAI in North Dakota. Yeah. We're finally at that point. Yeah. Which is really cool to see.
Yeah, I mean, the success Coach Stanton's had out of the gates here is it's pretty awesome, and I think that we're getting to that. I honestly believe in my life, and with him there, we're going to get to the ship, and it's going to happen, and we're all going to come together in this big bonfire, down by Uncle Ron's, formerly Uncle Ron's, currently the Spur, and we're going to have it's going to be pretty epic for any of these, any of the old dogs and new dogs. My great-grandfather was an alcoholic. My grandfather was an alcoholic who committed suicide. I think when I think my mom was pregnant with me, but it was in '84, so ish. That's the year I was born. And then my father was a bad alcoholic, and so it's heavy in the genetics for me myself. And I realized that probably in my late teens I started to feel like, okay, I got this kind of thing going on inside me. But a lot of I've told this story to the community. I did a speech a while back, and then I went in front of some kids in some schools, and I was. It was a very, very violent household. My father was extremely the physical aspect of it, like the beat downs my mom would get were just, they were astonishing. And the verbal aspect of it was probably just as bad. My hatred at the beginning of this for when I said for law enforcement, I had a bunch of situations when I was little where law enforcement was called and didn't do anything. And I said, well, this is kind of messed up. These guys are it's a small town. Like, oh, we'll take care of things through a conversation. And I'd watch my father physically assault the sheriff at the time. I mean, take him over the hood of a squad car on one instance, pushing, shoving him. I mean, stuff that you just can't do. And seeing this stuff happen, I'm like, man, what's going on with this? How is this even something that works? And so, that in with then the positive stuff started to come, and I had all these good guys around me. And then I started this, then weightlifting came into the picture. And then I got a hold of a bar, and then I could feel how the bar and being able to get stronger and stuff. And then the whole goal was to, when it got into the weight room, was like, okay, now I have control of something that I can come back, and it was going to help me. I was lucky enough to go to the National Academy out at Quantico and graduated from there, from class 270. And, we had President Trump came and spoke, and
wow.
he's partway into his speech and talking about our yellow brick run. And I get the point and the head nod and the smirk, from him, from down in the crowd, giving the hoorah type of thing. And it's like, I'm telling you about, just a crazy world in itself to think of yourself, coming from where we come from, right? These small towns. And then you're sitting there in Quantico, just outside D.C., and you got the President of the United States there, and just a split second, right? I mean, it's just a split second where he's just kind of looking down, gives that point, gives that head nod and the smirk. And I just thought to myself, I'm like, holy shit, this is like...
It's taking you places, dude.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I'm humbled, and some would make fun of me for that kind of story just because it's like, but... I mean, it's I don't know. To me, it's telling, and Dickinson has been just a huge part of that. The trauma that is so numbing, that became so numbing for me. Like now, like in uniform, people say stuff, and you get the stuff poking officers, or what maybe make officers upset, or with things people say. It's like a lot of it for me is it just becomes water off a duck's back, because I'm just like, man, I these other things that I've been exposed to in life, from my earliest memory that I have in life, which was my father pounding on top of my mother in the living room. I said through that, I mean, it's like, come on, like you try to get these other guys on board. You're like, hey man, don't worry about it, dude. It's just like, This is going to be, it's fine. And it's a blessing. I got that. And I'm in a profession now where it has set me up, I think, to be able to handle a barrage of different things and get some thick skins.
During COVID, have we increased with a lot of calls with opiates and stuff like that? Have the drugs increased on that end?
To attribute it exactly to COVID, it probably I couldn't give a great answer to it, but I can say that I mean, it has continued to become more prevalent to degrees. The opiates, the heroin, the M30, these ecstasy pills that are just rampant right now, running around the community. I mean, it seems like our officers are coming in contact with those as much as anything else right now when they're handling illegal drugs. And so, I saw one the other day. It was interesting. It was like maybe 15 years ago that it was the number of prescriptions, number of
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, prescriptions that doctors had been issuing for some of this medication, and then it was fast forward to current day, and I mean, it was exponentially higher. I mean, I wish I could cite the number offhand for it, but I mean, it was like, let's just say a number of like, I don't know, it was at 20 million, and now it's like at 75 million or some 100 million, something like that. I mean, it's just, it was pretty alarming when I saw the numbers themselves, and so. I know the one that's in. I heard the other day too, and doing some of my own podcast. Listening was I know like Jordan Peterson. I follow him, and he was addicted on benzos, like a Xanax and stuff. And the one to watch is like pay attention to how many people are prescribed these benzos, and the long-term effects of taking these benzos, and come time if you ever decide to get off of them, like these neurological issues and stuff. And if any, I mean, take a listen if you ever get a chance. But I mean, it was like the repercussions of that might be something that in the future I think we'll be dealing with in our profession as much as anything. Yeah. Still at the forefront for us is methamphetamine.
Oh yeah.
And heroin. The discussion with marijuana as it goes. I mean, I get asked that quite a bit, being in the profession as long as I have, and I just. I don't know. I mean, it's there's the trend that's occurring and the decriminalization and the legalization, and it certainly is probably going to head that way at some time. And it's like, okay, it's my philosophy on this is like, listen, like I'm about whatever the policymakers or the community want to be the law. Okay. And if they don't like the law, then change the damn law. Yeah. If you don't like, DUIs being at a 0.08 or whatever you want to complain about, well, go change the law. But you can't, don't hate on the people that are expected to go and enforce the very things
exactly.
that they didn't put that on paper. That's the guy you elected, the policymakers and the politicians, and so to speak, that put that law in, and you voted on them. So it's like reluctant. And even on the marijuana side of it, if it comes, it's like people ask, like, okay, well, you don't deal with a bunch of people who go smoke weed. At the end of the day, you deal with people who go, drink a 6-pack. As far as how it affects us as people, and it's like, yeah, but I agree. The most, we do a lot of alcohol related stuff. A good percentage of our stuff is alcohol related that we end up having to get involved in. But I'm like, do not think that by just decriminalization or legalizing this, if it ends up, marijuana, let's talk, it's going to, there's going to be some consequences that seep through the cracks and stuff. So, but whatever the law ends up being, that it is what it is.
And you guys are not hands tied, but your perspective as an individual, you don't have control over that. You have to enforce what you have to enforce. Legalize marijuana, it's going to decrease the footprint of our drug cartels in the United States. And that's one of the most asinine comments that I've ever heard. They've already pushed past that. They've pushed past the marijuana. They're into fentanyl and all this other stuff, as you know.
Yeah. The synthetic world as it relates in the effects and being able to get to the drugs. I mean, there's always going to be the black market to undercut whatever the market is, and finding a way. Out of Colorado, a couple law enforcement officers down there that have told stories about some of these houses that have been bought up down there, cartel related, and they're jamming and packing them full of marijuana plants, stuff like that. Try to make an argument things are legalized and stuff. And I don't believe it will curb those individuals that, the cartel and those that are in, let's just say, the black market illegal side of it that much.
They're businessmen.
Yeah.
There was a study that came out that 8 out of 10 police officers are obese. I get that, but they also use BMI.
Yeah, right.
You and I are obese for that. So that's where I kind of push back on it. But we do in every profession and everything. Yeah. So I had some factors behind it that you know much better than I. Long hours, shift work, lack of sleep, increased stress, lack of education to some extent. And so kind of speak to that. How have you combated that yourself? What does that look like?
Well, just some of the stuff at the very beginning was, my disdain for law enforcement and how I viewed them when I was growing up, and then what I wanted it to look like, or bring to it. Looking good in uniform, being physically fit, being able to handle yourself, high stress situations, have people look at the uniform in a manner that they're like, man, that looks good. That's my, I love that, man.
Positive for every officer that is patrolling, being in these high stress situations. Reverse engineer what you're going to have happen to you. It's going to be a lot of anaerobic work, a fast sprint, a scuffle. Hopefully we don't have to get to that, but it's anaerobic in nature, very short, fast burst with some aerobic stuff on the side. So you could stick very, very basically to the basics. So we look at this, we reverse engineer it. This is the demand what we need to have happen. And this is what our roadmap is. So a lot of anaerobic work, looking through all planes of motion, okay? Because a good quote that you'll appreciate that I always talked about to people, if you're in a performance-based, an athlete, LEO, firefighter, military, if you're doing all your stuff and you can do every one of your movements in a doorway, something's wrong. We're only in the sagittal plane. We're only forward and back. Then a big thing that I was thinking about when I was making this podcast is need a big focus on rate of force development, making sure you can produce the maximal amount of force in the minimal amount of time.
Yeah.
That's what we need. And then a big thing in short burst sprints or anything, a lot of posterior chain work, hammies, glutes. Talking to John Wellborn, who played in the NFL for 10 years. He's like, I could give a shit less if I step off the plane and I see a guy, big upper body, nice big neck, all this. He's like, you see the guy with the big fat ass and the big hamstrings, he's going to mess you up. Like that's the people you want to stay away from. So if I broke it down very specifically, multiplanar, an emphasis on rate of force development, and stick to the basics, man. And I'm sure yours looks something like that.
Our gunfights, our firefights, our time compressed, high stressed situations are 20 seconds and less. I mean, you these things, the people have this Hollywood gun battle sort of stuff happening in their mind, and they think, and it's just been horrible for the perception, because the reality is that this stuff happens in such a small, tight, high-stressed window. And, so, okay, how does that apply to, your expertise? And you just said it. It's, you gotta condense these things and being able to move, sprints, short burst stuff. And so for me, I try to center, I stick to the 4 cores, I'll stick to bench press, overhead press. Sometimes I'll mix some power cleans in on my overhead press days, because I got issues with my shoulder mobility and they get jacked up pretty easy. So I try to keep it a little bit varied there. But deadlifts, squats.
John Wellborn talks about it a lot in my philosophy. Whoever can hold posture and position longer is going to win in any type of football battle, gunfight. If you can hold posture and position against an external load, barbell, human, whatever it is, you're more than likely going to win that battle. And so
I've never heard it like that, but that actually that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
so think about
being
that.
a hell dog, playing for DSU too. I was just telling some of the college kids, taking on a punch step or whatever. If you the quicker, if your offensive lineman takes a bucket step, you got him beat. Small stuff like that if you can hold that against the external load, we talk about it with squats. I should not be able to know that bar's on your back is kind of what you want to do. 1 rep maxes are never going to be pretty, but I shouldn't be able to see that.
Yeah.
That's a big thing that I tell people. So